Tonight, broken system.
The current outdated and comparatively restrictive U.S. immigration system is putting the U.S. at a competitive disadvantage.
The humanitarian crisis at the border spills into an immigration battle in the halls of Congress.
And inflation hike. A spike in the end of summer gas prices fuels higher prices.
Plus, Christian morality and the rise of artificial intelligence.
Defending human dignity is going to uniquely fall upon Christians.
All this and more tonight on Faith Nation.
On Capitol Hill today, a blame battle over the border. Welcome to Faith Nation. I'm John Jessup.
And good evening in Washington. I'm Jenna Browder. Immigration reform, a top priority for lawmakers as they get back to work. Today on Capitol Hill, multiple hearings, all focused on the southern border.
From the humanitarian crisis to how administration policies affect the American workforce, lawmakers want accountability at the border.
National security correspondent Caitlin Berg brings us more in tonight's top story. Caitlin?
John, Jenna, there's bipartisan agreement the border crisis negatively affects both Americans and migrants. The big disconnect comes in who's to blame.
President Biden took an oath to enforce our nation's laws, and yet he's not doing that on the subject of immigration.
It was actually the Trump administration's border policies that imposed devastating human costs, particularly on families and children.
During a House Homeland Security Committee hearing, Tim Ballard, a former DHS agent and inspiration of the film Sound of Freedom, testified that failure to secure the border benefits human traffickers.
I have personally seen how ports of entry were responsible for helping rescue a child, catch a sexual predator, and start a chain of events that rescued multiple children from his abuse.
Ballard also pointed to data from the Health and Human Services Department showing at least 85,000 unaccompanied minors have disappeared after entering the U.S. and being placed in the custody of unvetted sponsors.
It's more difficult to adopt a cat from a shelter in the United States than it is to go down and take one of these children out of the custody of HHS and claim that I'm the sponsor.
Meanwhile, Democrat witness Lee Gallant, an ACLU attorney, highlighted the estimated 5,500 children separated from parents under the Trump administration policies.
5 years later, there remain hundreds of children who still have not been reunited with their parents because of the failure to document and keep track of the parents and children.
We're here investigating what's going on right now. Are y'all going to sue the Biden administration over the 85,000 missing children because of these policies?
Myra Cantu, wife of a Border Patrol agent, addressed the trauma experienced daily by her husband and his colleagues in their interactions with migrants.
Imagine this. A child who has just been through a horrible, traumatizing journey, may have possibly been raped or tortured by bad people, has now gained the trust of a Border Patrol agent. The child decides to vent to this agent and pours out every emotion he or she has been holding back. What was the plan for our agents who would be hearing these stories from the millions of illegal immigrants you and you were crossing?
Meanwhile, the White House now faces backlash from some Democratic mayors in cities like New York and Chicago, all struggling to deal with a major influx in migrants over the last year. Just this weekend, New York City Mayor Eric Adams warning that all city agencies could see budgets cut by 15% because of the increased cost of the crisis. John?
Caitlin, we heard from your report from Myra, one of the Border Patrol agents' wives, and she talked about the traumatizing trek that people make through. What more are we learning about their journeys?
Right. So a United Nations agency actually announced this week that the U.S.-Mexico border is the deadliest migrant land route. Many who come through experience sexual assault, rape, robbery, and even face abduction by criminal gangs, not to mention crossing remote terrain, deserts, rivers, jungles. Last year alone, 686 deaths were documented. John?
All right. CBN's Caitlin Berg. Thank you, Caitlin.
Thank you, Caitlin. And with us now, Tony Perkins, president of the Family Research Council. Tony, welcome. Republicans hitting this issue of immigration hard. Yesterday, we saw them hijack a hearing over book bans to talk about immigration. What do you make of this full court press by Republicans over the border?
Well, this is connected to government funding. I mean, if the Republicans are saying, look, if we're going to fund government, we've got to secure the border. We've got drugs coming across the board, fentanyl's coming across the board. We have open borders that are putting Americans at risk. And as I stated earlier, this is no longer just a Republican issue. You've got Democratic mayors that are weighing in on this issue. This is an American issue. We can't be a country without borders.
Tony, as you said, this is an American issue. We see Democrats and Republicans talking about it now. How do you think it's going to play out in the 2024 campaign? Will voters see it as a top issue?
I think it'll be an issue. I don't know that it's going to be the top issue. There's a lot of issues vying to be the top issue. I mean, we've got a lot of problems. When you look at the economy, I mean, any family that goes to the grocery store, I mean, I shop at the grocery store, and you look at there's a sticker shock almost every time you go into the store. Those are driving issues. Those, I don't care what you say about, you know, people say Bidenomics, president says it's working. I don't know who it's working for. It's certainly not working for the American people. So you've got the economic issues. You've got parents who are really, really engaged now with what's happening in our schools, this indoctrination that's taking place with our children, with all the LGBTQ issues that are being really shoved down kids' throats. That's an issue that parents are really being mobilized over. And then, of course, you go on the issue of the sanctity of human life. I think that's going to continue to play out on the political landscape of America.
The Family Research Council's Pray, Vote, Stand Summit is coming up at the end of this week. Tony, what are you most excited this time around?
Well, I think it's actually encouraging. We're going to see several of the Republican presidential candidates are going to be there. Donald Trump's going to be there. Governor DeSantis is going to be there. Mike Pence is going to be there. We're going to hear from Vivek. He's going to be there as well. And I think a couple of others are still talking about coming. But the more encouraging is that we've got folks coming from across the country. We're going to have a number of panel discussions on a host of issues that I just mentioned a moment ago. But we've got a number of breakout sessions. So this is not just about hearing speeches. It's about engaging in a conversation, getting tools, knowledge and information to go back home to make a difference. And so there's still room for folks. They can check it out at prayvotestand.org. Love to have them join us this weekend, Friday and Saturday, here in Washington, D.C.
Tony, just a few seconds left. You mentioned former President Trump. He's scheduled to speak on Friday. Polls show that his lead in the Republican field is only widening. Your thoughts on the 2024 presidential campaign so far in just a few seconds?
Well, I think the president has a tremendous track record to run on, and the nation is clearly divided. He is leading an element that's saying, look, I'm going to fight for you, and I think that remains attractive to a lot of Americans.
All right, Tony Perkins with the Family Research Council. Have a great event, and thank you for coming on this evening.
Thanks, Tony.
Always great to be with you guys.
In economic news tonight, a spike in gas prices fueling high inflation, even as costs for other goods ticked up at a more modest rate last month. The Consumer Price Index rose 3.7% in August compared to the same time last year. That's up from 3.2% in July. Core prices rose 4.3% in August, down from 4.7% in July, the smallest increase in almost 2 years. Those numbers remain far above the Federal Reserve's 2% target, though the White House says the conflicting data still signals overall inflation is cooling.
Turning to Bidenomics, we start from a position of strength. The U.S. economy is in solid shape, with real GDP growth supported by strong consumer spending that is itself supported by a strong labor market delivering wage gains, accounting for inflation.
Well, Steve Moore is a senior economic contributor at FreedomWorks, and he joins us now. Steve, I want to get your take on the latest inflation numbers and, of course, the White House response saying that Bidenomics is working. And, of course, I think what they're trying to say is, given where we were at the point of the pandemic and where we are now, it's working. But your take, Steve?
Well, we've had some really lousy and grim numbers this week when you look at the economic numbers. The big ones that came out were the real gold standard of economic data that comes out of the Census Bureau every year on poverty and incomes. And unfortunately, poverty was way up and incomes were way down. Those were really dismal numbers. So we saw, for example, a doubling in the child poverty rate in this country. This is supposed to be a recovery, and we have a doubling of the child poverty rate. We saw about a 5 percentage point increase in the overall poverty rate. And then incomes for the average family, and since Biden came into office, according to the Census Bureau, adjusted for inflation, have fallen by about $2,000. Those are terrible numbers. Those are rotten numbers. You know, COVID ended when right when Trump was leaving office, so we should be in a boom, and instead, you know, tough times. And incidentally, even the inflation numbers that came out this morning, they show that in the last month, consumer prices were up 0.6%. Well, you take that, you do that for a year, you're talking about 7.5% inflation. We're not out of the woods on inflation either.
Yeah. Steve, how have Americans' standard of living gone down in the last 2-3 years?
Yeah, like $2,000. By the way, that $2,000 number of decline, and that's for the average household, that number compares to, you know, I'm obviously a little biased, I work for Trump, but the incomes of the average family, median household income rose, you ready for this, rose by $6,000 when Trump was president. So these are diametrically opposite numbers. And when Jared Bernstein, who's the chief economist over there at the White House, is saying, you know, that everything's rosy, it's like, what country is he talking about? Americans are really struggling financially.
You know, earlier you mentioned the dismal numbers regarding child poverty, like you said, doubling from 12.4% in 2022, and that's up from 5.2% the previous year. Can you talk about ways in which that affects children, ways in which it's dire for them?
Well, you know, when you don't have enough money to put food on your table and you're really struggling financially, that's a really tough thing for kids and for single mothers. A lot of those families with kids are single mothers. And, you know, even that group really had good advances under Donald Trump. And what's really happening with those families, in my opinion, is, you know, yeah, they're making a little bit more money, but since Trump has came into office, prices are up 18%. And none of these families have seen their wages go up by 18%. I don't know about you, but mine haven't. So, you know, it's just people are falling behind. Now, the good news is inflation this year is, you know, now only running at 4%. But I'm worried. Look at the gas price. Look at what's happening to energy prices. The oil price just rose to over $90 a barrel. That means in the next few weeks, we're going to see gas prices go up to $4.25, $4.50 a gallon again. So again, inflation, the inflation problem is not over. And maybe the best thing right now for the government to do is cut government spending, which would ease some of the pressure on inflation.
Yeah, as you mentioned, we're still recovering from that, you know, 18% hike. So, yeah, there's that. All right, Steve Moore with FreedomWorks. Thank you, Steve. Good to see you.
Thank you.
Well, the moral implications of artificial intelligence coming up, how Christians should respond to the ever-evolving technologies of today. Artificial intelligence taking center stage on Capitol Hill today as top tech leaders met with lawmakers to discuss how to regulate AI. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer convened the bipartisan closed-door meeting, noting action needs to be taken as advancing technologies will affect every aspect of life as we know it.
The kind of innovation that unlocks new cures for cancer and other diseases, improves education, protects our national security, increases our food supply, but also sustainable innovation, so that we may find many new and creative ways to protect against AI's risks and minimize the chances of this technology going off the rails.
Among the tech leaders taking part today, Elon Musk, Mark Zuckerberg, and Bill Gates.
Some pretty big names there. Well, with the rise of AI, some Christians are expressing concern about the moral implications over ever-evolving technology.
Billy Hollowell shows us how people of faith should be facing the future.
When it comes to the true size and scope of artificial intelligence, the future is anything but certain. Promises of profound technological advancement come alongside fear over job loss and lapsed ethics.
Well, one of the problems of the whole issue of artificial intelligence is that landscape could change before I get to the end of this sentence.
Dr. Albert Mohler, president of the Southern Baptist Theological Seminary, says new moral dimensions surrounding AI emerge as fast as the technology evolves.
This is a truly frightening prospect. And I don't say that about everything. What we don't know, we don't know. And this really is setting something loose in the lab.
Mohler urges Christians to pay close attention to the claim AI could potentially develop a form of consciousness.
There is no such thing as a feeling machine. there may be a machine that mimics feeling. We're not merely feeling machines. We're not merely machines that mimic feeling. We're made in God's image. And so there has to be a distinction there, but keeping that distinction straight. And by the way, defending human dignity is going to uniquely fall upon Christians because the world is cashing out its ability to argue for human dignity.
Author Jeff Kinley agrees and adds a warning about allowing AI to diminish human purpose and value.
Obviously, one of the biggest concerns is that it replaces human intelligence. I mean, we are moving as a society towards replacing humanity just about every way possible, replacing human labor, human thought, human writing, trying to pretty much put humanity to the margins of the narrative here.
Unrestrained surveillance and the ability to hack the human brain are two potential concerns. Kinley, however, calls censorship and informational control the more immediate threats.
It's the idea of deception, because artificial intelligence is not human intelligence, and so there's obviously the capacity for a lot of bias in there, pre-scripted inherent bias, but also just the idea of putting out a false narrative and someone says, hey, the AI must know more than me, so I'm going to trust the AI more than the people who could be called conspiracy theorists.
Christian apologist Alex McFarland echoes these concerns and says it all comes down to who's programming the systems and how they're used.
Technology is generally amoral. Computers aren't necessarily good or bad, but what you do with them. You know, on the moral issues, Christians need to be very concerned about AI because so much of the code and the algorithms that run the internet come from the souls and minds of Silicon Valley liberals.
While the overall impact depends on human intention, there are also positive opportunities. Some experts are using the tech to improve human health and well-being, and Christian groups are translating the Bible into new languages with it. Author Johnny Moore, among others, believes America must pause, reflect, and offer moral leadership to ensure the right path forward.
All the good and the bad of it is going to be realized by us. The decisions we make now will determine the lives our children will enjoy. And this is the moment to press pause, to gather together, to ask the right questions, and to make sure the United States isn't just leading in technology, but that we're leading with our values too.
Only time will tell if these warnings are heeded. Billy Hollowell, CBN News.
Thank you, Billy. Help and hope in the aftermath of tragedy. CBN is on the ground in Morocco when Faith Nation returns. Welcome back. Death and injury counts are still on the rise in Morocco days after a devastating earthquake shook the country's southern region.
Yeah, now as hope of finding survivors dwindles, those who made it out alive are just beginning to pick up the pieces. As they do, CBN's Operation Blessing is on site with a message of hope.
This is one of the many villages outside of Marrakesh, about an hour's drive. You can see behind me how destructive this earthquake has been. And now, because of the fear of aftershocks, many of the people in this region are living in tents on the side of the road. On our way to these outlying villages, CBN News saw thousands of those people in tents. In the village of Ibn Hassin, we spoke with Fatna, who lost her husband in the earthquake. Her village has been destroyed, and her home is now the rubble you see behind her.
So my husband died, and the whole village has been destroyed by the earthquake, and I was shocked. There are rocks on the mountain, so this is not a good place to build houses. So they will not be able to build a house in this area anymore.
As night fell, Operation Blessing began a food distribution to many of these now homeless Moroccans. Very little, if any, relief has reached some of these outlying villages. That's why Operation Blessing is here to provide food, solar lamps since there's no electricity, and hope for the future.
It's just really humbling because of the support that our generous donors have gone to give us the opportunity to be instruments of love here in Morocco, but to also share with the people and hear their stories of loss and of devastation and start to bring that hope. It really touches you in your heart.
The heartbeat of many of these relief operations by Operation Blessing is the volunteers who come to give their time and efforts to bring hope and help to these people in need.
They're incredibly important. A lot of them have deeper ties locally than we do. This is my first time in Morocco, so having people who know the culture, who know the people, who know the language, can really help us connect and make those relationships that are really important when you're out here trying to demonstrate God's love.
Volunteers like Layla in Suhair.
They really need the basic thing, and we are very blessed and happy to be able to help here. They are very thankful, very grateful, very blessed, and we can feel like the blessing is coming into this area.
They need some people to encourage them because they have shock. Even small sandwiches make different with them. Yeah. Even when you come to them and encourage them by word, they make them very, very happy.
We just want to thank everybody who is donating for this special operation here. Whenever people come to them with aids and help, we can see that they are seeing a little bit of hope, and it makes a huge difference in their lives.
People feel the joy to receive this aid, and it's an important thing. They feel their life changing through this.
Chris Mitchell, CBN News from the village of Ibn Hassin, Morocco.
Thank you, Chris. You are never too old to learn something new. This inspirational story right after this. Finally tonight, a member of an older generation offering new inspiration to those around him. Of course, there's the old adage, you're never too old to learn something new.
That is right, and also the one you can, oh no, it's wrong. You can't teach an old dog new tricks. This does not apply here. For one Phoenix man, he's taking the adage to heart, and at the age of 79, he's heading back to the classroom. When he was a teenager, Miguel Ayala had to drop out of school to start working and help support his family. But he always dreamed of one day getting back to his high school, getting his high school diploma. That's where the Excel Center comes in. The school helps adults finish their degrees all for free. So at the age of 79, Miguel is finally a senior in high school, that is. In the next few months, he'll finish his degree and receive his diploma, officially living out his dream of graduating from high school. Congratulations to Miguel.
Major kudos.
Yeah, how inspiring.
That's wonderful.
Thanks for watching.
Have a great night.